Trial by Stone, the Dark Crystal podcast, is brought to you by Dream Fasting, the Dark Crystal Experience, the Facebook group on the Dark Crystal by fans for fans. To join the group, search on Facebook for Dream Fasting, the Dark Crystal Experience.
Another world, another time, in the age of wonder.
You are listening to
Trial by Stone.
Trial by Stone!
Trial by Stone!
This is what I came for.
Your vital essence, the dark crystal.
I can feel something. Hear it almost.
Don't move.
Don't move? Where would I go?
Quiet!
Here's your host, Philip Mitchell. Hello and welcome to Trial by Stone, and this is episode 44 of the podcast. I'm your host, Philip Mitchell, and just want to say thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of Trial by Stone, the Dark Crystal podcast. If you're new to the show, just want to say welcome. For those, of course, who are new to the show, this is a podcast that's all about the Dark Crystal. And it's been a very fantastic year for Dark Crystal. It's a lot has been going on that has occurred, from this year, and as we sort of look forward to sort of in a way the future of the Dark Crystal. And so for this episode, of course, with the show being released, in December 2017, it is of course the 35th anniversary of the film The Dark Crystal. So I wanted to, just do an episode, for this month where we'll, go through some of the highlights from this year, celebrate the 35th anniversary of the film, and of course chat a little bit about Age of Resistance and what, we hope things to come with the, with the Dark Crystal, and also with the podcast as well, which we'll definitely get into. So to help me all that, I brought along a friend of mine, my brother from another mother, as he would, he would say to me, as I would say to him as well, Jamie Prater. So Jamie, I just want to say thank you so much for being a part for this episode of Trial by Stone.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on. You doing this podcast inspired me to do my podcast, which have been amazing. So I attribute much of my know-how to you. And so yeah, thanks for having me on.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, that's the thing. I guess, we'll chat about some of your podcasts that you've been doing. I mean, there's sort of, you got on quite a number of shows. I think you got, the Perfect Organism, the Alien Saga podcast, and also a more recent edition, Shoulder of Orion, the Blade Runner podcast, which I've just been listening to. I've always been listening to them the moment that they come out, and they're always just fantastic episodes with your discussions with Blade Runner, with yourself and your co-hosts, on Blade Runner, and it's just been a very exciting time for fandom.
Yeah, it has been. Like you said, I have the Perfect Organism, the Alien Saga podcast, and Shoulder of Orion. Shoulder of Orion is more recent. The Alien podcast has been around for over 2 years, almost 3 years now.
Yeah.
Shoulder of Orion, we started in August, and we are the only Blade Runner podcast there is. Period. End of story. And with the new movie coming out, and our growth has been crazy, and it's been great. And we just, as you know, we interviewed the guys from Weta Workshop a couple days ago and published that episode, and it was a dream come true. It's a kind of a bucket list thing to talk to miniature artists. Yeah. I love those guys. I love what they do. They're different. Not the same guys who worked on the Lord of the Rings, but it's the same company, so it kind of is the same people. Yes. Yeah, it's been really, really great.
No, which is fantastic, and I strongly urge any of the listeners here from that are listening to the show to definitely give those shows a listen if you ever get a chance to. So Perfect Organism, the Alien Saga podcast, and Shoulder of Orion, the Blade Runner podcast. And of course, I'll put the links in the show notes. But yeah, I just thought, I love those podcasts, and just excited to hear more, from you, of course, on those. So, so I guess, first off, I mean, I kind of want to chat about the podcast for a bit, with, the future of, the Trial by Stone, the Dark Crystal podcast. And recently I've sort of decided to, I've been doing this show for about, almost 3 years now, and which has been fantastic. And I've sort of decided to actually create a Patreon for Trial by Stone, which is sort of effectively sort of being turned into a podcast network of sorts. As from December onwards, the plan really is to have at least 3 shows a month, with all things Dark Crystal. So you're going to get Trial by Stone. You'll get episodes of the Gathering Songs, which is a Dark Crystal discussion show, which is sort of branching off just based on previous discussion shows that I've done or that we've done. And also, Jamie and I, we are actually working on a new show called the Dark Crystal Minute, which has been really great. And with that podcast, it's sort of where both of us we pretty much break down each minute of the film of the Dark Crystal. So it's going to be like a 90 episode series with the Dark Crystal Minute. So which is pretty cool. And so, and this is something, that's sort of been on my mind for quite a while, because I know that these Trial by Stone's been just a every monthly kind of show at the moment. But because of what the recent events with the announcement of the Netflix series, The Age of Resistance, that I thought it would be sort of great to sort of get more content a bit more regularly, rather than just posting them whenever I usually do, either at the end or the start of each month, just to have something on schedule for you listeners to check out. So at the moment, like all these shows, they're all going to come out on the 9th for Trial by Stone, the 18th for the Gathering Songs, and the 27th for the Dark Crystal Minute. So all those shows, they are going to continue to be free each month. And then, but of course, if you want to get much earlier access to those shows, as well as a bonus show that I'm going to be working on as well, you can check that out at patreon.com/Dark Crystal Podcast. I will have that link in the show notes. But I just want to let you listeners know that I'm just, starting this campaign to sort of to continue making these episodes in the years to come, and sort of help finance the show a bit. I've been doing this for a couple of years, sort of out my own pay, which I know is with a lot of other podcasts they sort of do that. We all kind of do it as a hobby and whatnot. So just sort of wanted to do that to sort of help keep the podcast running and all that kind of stuff. So it's just a very exciting times for the podcast and also for the Dark Crystal.
Totally. There's so much to be excited about, and I know right out on the horizon are those new figures by McFarlane, or is it McFarlane? I believe they're producing the Jen and Kira crystals.
Yes,
or crystals figures.
Yes, of course. Yeah, we haven't heard much from them for a while actually. So I'm sort of anticipating that they will probably be coming out sometime next year. At this rate, but they did bring out the Labyrinth figurine with the Goblin King with David Bowie's. I think that just came out very recently. So so it's going to be really exciting for the future when as we sort of start to get a little bit more merchandise for the for the franchise in a way. Yeah, so I guess you know, we might as well just go through just like some of the highlights that has come out this year. I'll probably try and do it as chronologically as possible. But I know a lot has really happened this year. So yeah, so I mean the big thing has really been about early this year was the launch of The Power of the Dark Crystal, which was sort of a film sequel to the film that was going to happen. It was sort of an on and off thing. It was happening, then it wasn't, then it was, then it's not now. And then there was like late last year that they announced that they decided to sort of adapt it as a comic book series, which was a bit of a surprise. Sort of came out of nowhere. Much like the other sort of big thing with Age of Resistance, which we'll get into later on. But yeah, I was actually just curious, Jamie, if you, I don't know if you had a chance to read those comics or not really.
You know, I haven't read the comics. I am very familiar with the story for Power of the Dark Crystal. You know, of course, I think that was on again, off again for over 10 years. You know, and I know you and I were following it really well. We were really excited. Lots of stuff going on. I probably will buy the comics just to have and to read. I'm not like overly excited about it, but I will say the imagery, the art looks amazing. So much love and care went into it. Yeah, so I mean, I definitely will be getting involved and purchasing. But it's interesting that they chose to say, hey, you know, let's release this story to the fans. So, and I know that there was speculation as well that they would maybe eventually make it into a movie. And I know that you and I discussed this, or it was discussed at some point.
Yeah.
But so yeah, I think I mean, some of those covers, I mean, all the covers are amazing, but a few of them are like just whoa. I mean, they're beautiful.
Yeah, but some are a bit out there. But yeah, like for the most, I mean, for me, for the most part, like they've been really. It's interesting, I think, to say the least, with the story itself. But yeah, I mean, like the 12 issues. I mean, I think that'll conclude sometime in March or April. So yeah, definitely by then is when sort of we'll get the whole full story, which will be very exciting and be able to sort of. And as well for future episodes of with the Gathering songs, that I'm sure we'll do a breakdown of those comic book series, and as well I might as well plug for a future episode where I had a chance to chat to Philip Kennedy Johnson, who co-wrote issues of The Power of the Dark Crystal, and yeah, had a great time chatting to him, and so. That's an episode I'm sort of looking forward to bringing it out there for the fans. Just chatting about those comics. So, yeah. And, I mean, that was the other thing that, I mean, I'll probably will say on the show that he chatted to me about, which I might as well bring it out, is that, you know, whether there is still that potential that they could bring it back as a film, which I think, you know, could happen, you know, it could happen more now than ever, now that we've got this new Netflix series, and you know, we're building everything for Age of Resistance, that, I mean, I could see that they could, you know, reuse most of these, you know, reuse the Skeksis and the Mystics that they're going to build for the show, and the Podlings and the Gelflings, that they could build all these creatures and then reuse them for something like a Power of the Dark Crystal film, whether that actually, you know, gets released in cinemas or whether it just actually becomes just a Netflix movie as well. So I think there is, you know, potential for that to happen, but I think it's just going to be a wait and see if that does happen. I think based on how Age of Resistance goes.
Yeah, I would agree with you. You know, and you talking about that, I realized right away that, Netflix is in an interesting position now. So they're sinking all this money in. I mean, you're probably talking $40 or $50 million. I can imagine in a 10-hour Dark Crystal. I mean, this isn't easy stuff.
No.
But what they'll have is they'll have um, the Crystal Castle or the Dark Castle or whatever. They'll have
Yeah.
that set piece. They'll have set pieces for Thra and maybe Augras and whatever. They'll have everything there for them to go back to these sets and reuse them. It'll be cheaper for them. So they're not building sets anymore. They're just augmenting or adjusting for another story. Should Power of the Dark Crystal take off?
Yeah,
I'm
absolutely.
sorry.
Yeah.
Should Age of Resistance take off?
Yeah, absolutely, and that's sort of what I'm sort of thinking about. That's the only reason I could see Power of the Dark Crystal coming back as a film, just depending on how Age of Resistance goes, and yeah, also now that they're building these sets, that could be another clue into sort of seeing the things from the comics, whether we're going to see those sets in Age of Resistance, to save costs and whatnot. So yeah, just something that's just sort of been on the back of my mind. I would love to hear, fans, what you think of that. If you think that Power of the Dark Crystal, if you love to see it back as a film, or if you're just happy, just the way it is in that comic book form. So I'd be interested to hear what you think of that. And of course, like as we got on, I mean, I know the Funko reaction figurine sort of finished up with the Gotham figurine. I think that came out sometime in March. Which, I mean, for me, that was like it was probably one of my favorite figurines out of those. Like, I know, did you get a chance to get your hands on any of these figurines or?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
I'm staring at the Gotham figurine right now. I loved it the most. It's the most accurate. It's the most screen like it looks the most like what I see in the movie.
Yeah.
The rest of them were really great too, but this one just felt like when I saw it, I was like, I'm buying one. I have to. So yep, it's on a shelf right now, and it's next to my Shard replica, and it's sitting in front of a mini Dark Crystal poster. So.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah.
It's great. Which ones did you buy?
I ended up getting them all. So so I got them all in display and
in the box or out?
Out, yeah. Like I do have them in the box as well, but I'm sort of contemplating about whether to sell the ones in box or just to keep them for a bit longer or just
that's the thing about Dark Crystal stuff. It ages really well, and it's worth a lot of money.
Yeah, I mean, especially with the Kira and Gotham double set figurine that was an exclusive for New York Comic Con, and yeah,
did you get one of those?
I don't think I've said this anywhere else, but I will say I don't know how, but I managed to get two of them. It was weird because the first time I got it just as as usual. I mean, I actually did buy two that time because I bought one for myself and I bought one for a friend of the show, of course, Bland Garrett. Because at the time that was sort of like the only way you could actually get this figurine was at an Australian store, Pop Culture, and because Pop Culture wouldn't ship it out to the US, so it's sort of you had to know someone from Australia to buy the figurine to then ship it out, and so that was that. And I wasn't planning to buy any more, and then when I was on Pop Culture a good couple of months ago, and I just typed Dark Crystal. Actually, I was like, I'll just see if that figurine is still on the store, because I believe it actually did disappear from the store, and I think what probably happened is they probably realized that they had another figurine in stock, in their inventory or whatever. Like, all right, let's put it back on the website, and they did. And I believe that was the last figurine, and I saw it, and I was like, oh, should I get this? Should I not? And it's like, oh. And then I sort of ended up buying one as well.
It's like you're going to go to a one of those Alcoholics Anonymous meetings.
Yeah,
You and our friend Ezekiel
Yeah.
Did you buy Dark Crystal figurines?
Yeah.
Yes. How many did you buy? 4, really?
Yeah. Yeah. Ezekiel, I mean, yeah, I mean, he's a big fan of the show, and you know, and he runs a Dark Crystal Facebook group called Dreamfast and the Dark Crystal Experience, which is a great group for all things on Dark Crystal. For any of the listeners to check that out, and I'll try and put that into the show notes as well. And of course, they sort of help promote the show, and you know, and I certainly want to thank them for for supporting us, which is very awesome. But yeah, I know
Absolutely.
it was just one of those things where when I saw him, just like, oh, you know, like I would never see it. Like, yeah, without
Rub it in,
regret at
rub it
all.
in, rub it
Yeah,
in.
I know, I
Without
know.
any regret at all. Well, I hope
Yeah,
that the figurines coming from McFarlane, I mean that
yeah.
the Goblin Master of, what's his name? You know,
Oh,
the
the
actor.
Goblin. Oh, Goblin King. David Bowie.
Yeah, Dave, I mean, the figurine is amazing. It's amazing. And
Yeah,
it's screen accurate. I mean, it looks just like him. I hope the figures for Jen and Kira are just as accurate, because it's really hard to get Jen and Kira correct. And as we've seen, a lot of outlets, officially licensed outlets, try and reproduce Jen and Kira, and they don't look anything like, or the clothes might look right, but the just face is off. So
yeah.
my hope is that they really get that face right, and that Kira has wings.
Yeah, and yeah, no, that'd be fantastic. I mean, that's the thing. Like the designs for the Gelflings have always been a big challenge. Even during the making of the Dark Crystal, just to pull it off, and but I mean, and that's going to be the most interesting thing with how all these other Gelflings are going to look like in Age of Resistance, which is going to be pretty cool. And also, I mean, speaking a little bit about Labyrinth, I mean, as we're recording, they just announced that that Archaea are doing a Labyrinth prequel comic book series. I don't know if you.
Interesting.
Yeah. Entertainment Weekly, they just reported that Boom Studios imprint Archaea is publishing the first comic based on the movie, and this, and they're saying that it's an ongoing comic, and it's just sort of about how David Bowie's character. I mean, I'm going to quote Lisa Henson in this one. It's the backstory of how Jareth came to be in the labyrinth himself. The Goblin King, he's not a goblin, he's a human. Many people have asked, well, how did he get there? So that's something that we thought we would explore. So yeah, which I find that's really interesting for them to with this labyrinth. Which of course I think I vaguely remember that the Jim Henson Company had a big deal with Boom Studios, their imprint Archaea, to make a certain amount of Jim Henson related titles. So, of course, that was something that would have been part of the works, and I'm certainly hoping that there'll be more Dark Crystal comics in the future. Probably once Power of the Dark Crystal wraps up, then hopefully we'll get something more, which would be very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They'll probably do some kind of pre-Age of Resistance story, like maybe
Yeah,
a
like a
6-part
prelude.
story or something.
Yeah.
Like a prelude, just to kind of build it up. That'll be interesting. I know that we're probably about a year and some time away from the premiere of Age of Resistance, so they're going to really ramp it up, and it's going to be interesting to see where it reaches and who's excited about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think it'd be interesting, especially with the tie-ins, whether they were tied into to comic books, or that there could be books as well. I mean, I know we got Joe J.M. Lee, who's been writing, who wrote Shadows of the Dark Crystal, and we'll definitely chat about his recent book Song of the Dark Crystal, which came out this year. And so there is a lot of potential out there, to create these lots of stories that ties into the Netflix series. Because I mean, really, for the Jim Henson Company, I think they're still looking at the Dark Crystal as their Star Wars. To put it that way, I would think. So yeah, I think it's going to be really interesting the future of the comics. That's for certain. And of course, I mean, yeah, I mean, I know the Dark Crystal sort of came out on vinyl as well. I know there was like a record store day exclusive, and I think probably by the time this episode's out that they've released a special edition of the vinyl soundtrack, which just comes with new artwork, which is very awesome. So, which I mean, I don't actually have a vinyl player or, to be able to find one to play it, but it's awesome to see, awesome to hear, I should say, that, that it just sort of, bringing it back.
Yeah, and it's beautifully, like the artwork on the cover, it's just beautiful. I'm gonna buy one just to frame, and I have an old Victrola from like the 1940s, so I probably won't play it on that, but I would like to get a new vinyl player and listen to it because I'm sure it would sound great.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. And so I'm just very, very excited to see, with that release coming down the track. And of course, I mean, the big announcement really for the year with Dark Crystal is, of course, the Dark Crystal Age of Resistance. And I mean, that was such a great story about how I sort of discovered about the show. I sort of chatted about in previous episodes, which I'll probably recap it again. But I'm actually curious from your point of view, how did you find out about the news on the Age of Resistance?
I'm trying to think, because so much of that period was me trying to get you out of bed.
Yeah.
Or me trying to get your girlfriend to get you out of bed. Let me just make that clear.
Yes, yeah.
Because Philip lives in Australia and I live in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
So, but we'll get to that in a minute. But so I was just on the net the net. I sound like it's like 1995. I was just on social media on Facebook and just scrolling through and doing, and then I saw something like someone said, "Did you hear about the new Dark Crystal show?" And I'm like, they're wrong. They don't know what they're talking.
Yeah.
Full of my ego. I needed to be humbled. And then I saw someone was like posted in some group, there's going to be a new Dark Crystal show. And I'm like, what? And I didn't quite understand what I was seeing. And I clicked on it, and then I thought, okay, this is just a retrospective documentary on Netflix. Great, because it starts off with, images that I've seen before from the making of the World of the Dark Crystal.
Yeah.
That's on the DVDs and the Blu-rays, and then all of a sudden it cuts to these people that I don't know fashioning arms and hands and feet, and then Dark Crystal, Age of Resistance. You see the Skeksis turn his head at the end, and I'm like, oh my god! Like my jaw was on the floor. I remember this is when my sister and her family were living with us at the time, and I was like, Lizzie, because my sister and I are pretty close, and we really share a lot of nostalgia for the Dark Crystal, and we love a lot of the same things.
Yeah.
And I was like, Lizzie, there's gonna be a Dark Crystal movie. And she's like, what? I said, Dark Crystal show on Netflix. And she's like, what? I was like, yes. Pardon me. That's how excited I am right now. So then I went to your page and, my brother from another mother. And I was like, do you swear on your show? I don't want to swear. No, is it G-rated? I'll keep
I keep it family friendly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I was like, where the blank is Philip?
Yeah.
And I was like looking for you all over, and I was like, is he up? And then I was like, oh, okay, it's early for you, or is the middle of the night? Because it was the evening that I saw it.
Yeah. Because so I think the announcement, I think it happened at 1 a.m. So I think it was definitely like the middle of the night for me at this time. That I was like just asleep, unaware of this big Dark Crystal news. And also, I mean, that's the other thing that I do, before I go to bed is I do have a tendency to put my phone on airplane mode just because, just in case if I get messages from anyone from the US, because of the time zones and just like things going off in the middle of the night. But that was probably one of the nights where I kind of wish didn't have the airplane mode off. But yeah, I mean, and then when I woke up, and then my my partner or my fiance, Shannon, she woke me up and she's said, Dark Crystal Netflix, and I'm like, what's happening? I just and then like I think I looked on the phone, I saw all the announcement stuff, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go on my computer on my Mac to really look at this stuff, and so I went to the darkcrystal.com where their front page had all a bit of details about the announcement and that trailer, and I was sort of just blown away. It's just like it just came out of nowhere, and just it was just the biggest surprise, and the best probably kept secret from anything, with the Dark Crystal. So, and I'm just and then I think like half an hour later, I did a first time Facebook Live video to sort of try and break it all down.
And you're all sleepy. And
Yeah.
You're all like, whoa.
Well, what's happened? Yeah. And
I just remember again that time, whatever time of day it was. I was chatting with Shannon, and I didn't realize what time it was for you guys. And I said, "Where's Philip?" And she goes, "He's asleep." I said, "Wake him up." And she goes, "Okay."
Yeah. So no, it was a great day. And then I sort of joked about it when I was at work, and I know one of the guys at work, he's like, "Oh, how you been?" I'm like, I'm just like, "Oh, I've just lost it. I've lost it." He's like, "Why?" And then I showed him the trailer, knowing that I'd do this Dark Crystal podcast, and he was like, "Whoa, that's awesome!" So, yeah. So no, I was very over the moon about it, and and then it was just scrambling to get a new show out, to chat about Age of Resistance, which I did with that roundtable, which was certainly one of the big highlights for the podcast, to try and break down the trailer, what we saw from the trailer, what we'd love to see in Age of Resistance. And I know I've been meaning to have you on the show for a while, because I know you probably have a lot of things on your mind about Age of Resistance and what you probably would like to see in the show.
Yeah, I much unlike Power of the Dark Crystal, which is the story that we thought we were going to get for a long, long time. Age of Resistance kind of dropped, and we had a small little synopsis of what the thing was going to be, but it's been fascinating because we really don't know anything about it. I mean, we know a little bit now. We know that it's set before it was before the Gelfling Purge, before the Skeksis really fully took control, and it's a story about three Gelflings, and one of them discovers the plot against them, and that's all that I really know. In terms of what I expect and what I hope for, that's an interesting. As you know, as everyone knows, I am. The world of the Dark Crystal, Thra, is the home world, as everyone knows who listens to this show. It means so much to me. It's my home too. It's a place where when I watch the film, when I listen to the music, which is all the time, because I have a full unabridged digital file soundtrack. When I'm there, it's my home. It's the world that I've lived in since I was 8 years old, or however old I was when I watched it. And the idea that I'm going to be returned to that home, I can't even describe to you. I mean, I can't, because you and I, we can probably talk without speaking. And to understand how important this film is to us, our memories as children, our connection as an adult. I mean, you and I connected over this film, and then we connected over Star Wars. I mean, this film has created a community, a brotherhood, a sisterhood, and it's so important to me. It's one of the most important worlds that I continue to live in. And when I listened to it, the other day I was thinking about when I listened to the soundtrack of The Dark Crystal, it's like, I can't describe to you. Maybe it does the same thing for you. I don't know. We're all different. But when I listen to the soundtrack of The Dark Crystal, it's like someone takes me and cradles me in their arms and says, it's going to be okay. And not that like all this bad is happening, but like it's like your mother's cradling you in your arms, and you're in this protective womb, and that's what the Dark Crystal means to me. It's something so powerful that it's hard to put into words. So the idea that we're going to return to the Dark Crystal, to Thra, to the Gelflings, even though it's not going to be about Jen and Kira, we are going to see Mystics probably, and Skeksis that we know and love, or fear, or whatever. It's so exciting. At the same time, and I'm sure many people feel this way, there's a little bit of nervousness because they have to get it pitch perfect. They cannot. It's going to be very difficult for them to recreate perfectly the world that we know. It's going to look newer, so we're going to have to be okay with that. I don't know what they're filming on. I would imagine they're filming on digital because it's cheaper. So we're going to have to realize that it's going to be clean. Really crispy clean, and so we're gonna have to get over that hump. But unless maybe they use gauzes or all that kind of stuff, which I hope they do. But I just really hope that they stay true to the world, and that when the first images roll on episode 1 of Age of Resistance, whether I'm hanging out with you in Australia, which is what I want to do for the for the premiere, we look at each other, or I look at my other friends or whatever, and I think we're home. Yeah. So those are my expectations.
Yeah, it's going to be really something. Because with that news, that's really what changed the podcast in a big way. And it's really a big part of why I want to sort of expand with the podcast so much more, with trying to create at least 3 episodes a month. And while the 2 episodes will be new, and the gathering songs, they're just going to be just sort of previous episodes of Trial by Stone, but just sort of being rebranded into the gathering songs. And then of course down the track, we'll have new content for the gathering songs. And so it's really doubled my efforts a lot more, now that the Age of Resistance is happening. Because that was something that I probably have said a couple of times on the show, that that I wasn't too sure like what was going to be next for the Dark Crystal. I thought once it was awesome with the comics that are coming out with Power of the Dark Crystal, and I know Joe, who's writing the Dark Crystal books, still got 2 more to go, and I wasn't too sure like if that was going to be it, if that was going to be the end after all that. And I was thinking about whether to stop doing the show, or because I just wasn't sure like what if anything more was going to happen with the franchise. And now with this Age of Resistance, it's just it has changed my world a little bit in a way, in a great way. So there's just a lot more potential now with the podcast, more than ever now. As we get closer to the release of Age of Resistance. We still don't have a release date. We'd be awesome if it came out next year, but I think, we're sort of anticipating a 2019 release for Age of Resistance. And just the fact that, we're getting 10 episodes, and one of the co-exec producers, Javier, who... I think he actually broke the news at Comic-Con during some interview that they're going to be 1-hour shows, which, my mind was just more blown away by that. Because, sort of anticipating, there might be just half-hour shows. But yeah, so it is very exciting. And, probably the thing that I probably would like to see out of the show, or what I sort of think might happen, is I think it's going to, sort of establish, each sort of Gelfling clan on each episode, and then they sort of build up as a team towards the end, and to fight against the Skeksis. But we still don't know much about the plot or whatnot, so that's very exciting with the Age of Resistance.
Yeah, and what's really exciting about the Age of Resistance to me is there's been a lot of talk since Power of the Dark Crystal. Power of the Dark Crystal was kind of controversial. Well, number one, because everyone had been waiting for it for a long time. And number two, Jim Henson had kind of had specific wishes about the Dark Crystal not needing a sequel. And I really believe that the best story to tell is the one they're about to tell. It's about the Gelflings before the Skeksis purged them, or purged Thra of their existence, except for two. And and it makes me think about the scene in the Dark Crystal when Kira and Jen go into the houses of the old ones, and how magical and mysterious it is. You could feel memories there. I mean, they really did an amazing job of conjuring the sense of history and memory in this really space that we're really not even familiar with. And so to bring that to life, it would be even interesting if the first episode of Age of Resistance started with that scene, with Jen opening the door. He goes, "What is this place?" And she goes, "We don't go in here anymore." And he goes, "I can hear something. Feel it almost. Yeah. And if they open the show with that scene, and then all of a sudden we're looking in the inside, and then all of a sudden the inside turns back into what it used to be, and then they open the show. I think that would be a great entrance. I don't know what they're gonna do.
Yeah, that would be kind of a cool opener, actually. Yeah.
It'd be a great opener.
Yeah.
But no matter how they open it, 10 hours of this show. 10 hours. I mean, you've sustained this podcast for 2 years. No, more than that.
Yeah. A bit over 3 years. Yeah.
Yeah. Because you started before mine. You've just sustained it on a movie made in 1982 that's an hour and a half long. Not barely. And so, Age of Resistance ensures Trial by Stone will be around for years and years to come.
Yeah, I definitely agree on that. And there's just a lot to look forward to now more than ever. Just very exciting times. With this Age of Resistance, and it's just great. And as I'll continue to create lots of content for the show, and I hope that we get new listeners to come on board and check it out, and hopefully get an interest for not only for the podcast but also in interest for the Dark Crystal as well. Which is fantastic. Yeah. And I guess we'll move along as we get towards sort of the second half of the year, which July was actually a pretty big month when they released the two books, Song of the Dark Crystal, which was like the second part of J.M. Lee's Dark Crystal young adult novel series. And as well as there was another book called The Dark Crystal Tales, which was sort of like a picture book style, based on stories, and it took place before the events of the film. I know it's kind of like a fun sort of little short children's storybook kind of thing. I don't know if you had a chance to check any of those out.
Well, I certainly got the Dark Crystal, the Ultimate Visual History. I have seen the other book, and the other books, I should say. Mm-hmm. I own the first book by J.M. Lee, which is Shadows of the Dark Crystal, I think. Is that
that's
right?
Correct. Yeah.
And their Shadows is very dense and mythological and really well researched and well put together. I need to finish it. I haven't finished it yet. Of course, me being a behind the scenes freak, the Ultimate Visual History, which is funny because I think that title is kind of funny because it's not just a visual history, it's a technical history as well. It's a making of, it's a behind the scenes history. But that book was like Christmas time.
Yeah, it was, yeah. Which
I haven't even begun to break into it. I have a little bit, but there's so much to it. And it's a great time to be a fan, to get a book that big, that huge, with those many pages, and the production and the imagery and I know Cassine Gaines you've had on the show, the author, who put it together with the Henson Company. I mean, it's incredible.
Yeah, I mean that was sort of one of the big sort of book releases. Yeah, especially in September with the Ultimate Visual History, and of course, like I mean, with Song of the Dark Crystal as well. I mean, I had a great show with chatting with Joe with JM Lee about the Song of the Dark Crystal, and we sort of got into spoiler territory as well. So you can find the previous episode of that. I think that was episode 41 with JM Lee, and episode 42 was with Cassine Gaines, and that was actually a great show. Chatting to him about the book, and like it is an amazing book, and I mean for any fans that haven't checked it out, have got yourself a copy. It's definitely worth getting, even if it's just get it for yourself. Just think of it as a Christmas present to yourself, if you have to.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It is an amazing book that goes into detail about the making of the Dark Crystal, and just with hundreds of concept art and behind the scenes photography. It was amazing, and it's one of those books that I'll definitely be every time when I'm doing a podcast or I'm trying to do some research, that'll be my go-to book. Going just finding some of these little details and whatnot with the Dark Crystal, and I mean like going from that, and I mean with in that month as well, I think is when there was a company called Riverhorse, and which they specialize with doing board games. I know in the past they did do a board game for Labyrinth, and they actually announced that they were going to do one for the Dark Crystal, which is going to come out early next year. So that's going to be really exciting, to have another board game for the Dark Crystal. Yeah,
the board game is very interesting. I know there's a video about it, and kind of a little bit of behind the scenes, and it's really well produced. Just everything about it is really great. I mean, I any Dark Crystal enthusiast should purchase it, and the figures and everything is just awesome.
It is, yeah. So which I mean, I'm sure in the future episode, with its Trial by Stone or probably the Gathering songs, that could be another discussion, another episode that we can put towards just discussing about the board game and our thoughts about it. And then probably from there, sort of the rest of the year was sort of pretty quiet in a way with the Dark Crystal. I know darkcrystal.com, they around that time, around September, that they announced the Creator Creature contest, which will be interesting to see how that goes. When the contest has ended, when they announce who won and all that kind of stuff. So, which is kind of still cool to see them still doing the contests on the website. Which I mean, I must admit, I really thought that the fan film was going to be the last that they probably would ever do. So, I like that they're still sort of getting fans involved in some way. With the Dark Crystal, and in regards with age resistance. So, and I mean, from that point, sort of the rest of the year was seemed a bit quiet. Which I mean, so the big thing was one of these things I sort of discovered was that Lisa Hanson, I think she was interviewed at Dragon Con, and she sort of slipped word about that they were working on a 4K movie or release for the Dark Crystal, which was very, very awesome to hear. That it was one of those things where, hoping that this year that they would bring it out this year, because it's 35 years of Dark Crystal, that it would sort of be a good sort of tie-in to release the film this year. And so, and I mean, that was probably like one of my only sort of, probably one of my only little disappointments, I guess, with this year was that we didn't get that 4K release this year.
Mm-hmm.
I know, but I mean, but the fact that we're sort of getting Age of Resistance, I'm sort of actually okay about it. But it was like one of those things where, early in the year, midway through the year, it was like, I wonder when we're going to hear about a 4K release, and sort of didn't happen. But yeah, I mean, with this Age of Resistance, I'm sort of like, I'm okay, if they delay just a tad longer.
Yeah, we know we're about to get like a treasure at, there's kind of a treasure at the end of the rainbow, or there's a treasure at the end of the trail, and we're going to be on that trail for a while. But if they're pushing these things, all of this just kind of keeps us a little bit busy until Age of Resistance drops. So I'm cool with that too. And, again, I mean, they need to take as long as they need to for Age of Resistance to get it right. So I'm all good.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like, I mean, my only speculation that I could think of that I sort of have a feeling that they might have had a plan to have it released this year. And the only reason I could see if there was a delay at their end, I would think it would just be probably to do with potentially restoring the original film negative to to convert from film to 4K resolution. And whether there was, quite a bit of damage that they really needed to clean up for the release, which is something that, I mean, even when I watched the Blu-ray version of the film, that you do see the occasional sort of film what do you call them, like spots or that sort of thing. So I mean that's just one of those things where I'm just curious if there was originally planned for it to come out this year, but whether it got delayed because of that. Which, I mean, something I was just sort of curious about, but yeah. But it's cool that I think, I mean, as of now they haven't officially announced it since we're recording in November. So, but I think I'm certainly hoping by December that they will at least have a 4K a trailer for the 4K release of the film and what we'll be expecting. So no, which would be very awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. And I know that you discovered. I think you were the first person to discover what the cover will look like for the 4K release, which is interesting.
Yes. Yeah.
So yeah, we'll see. I mean, I was hoping for like an all out like big behind the scenes documentary or whatever, but I know that there's some speculation that it'll probably be pretty bare bones, and that's not really a 4K restoration. It's just a 4K up, like a what do you call that? An upscale, an upscale or an up convert or whatever, which still be great. I mean, I have the Blu-ray, and the Blu-ray is phenomenal.
Yes, yeah, yeah, without a doubt, yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely one of the best versions of the film to see it on the Blu-ray, yeah. So I mean, it'd be really interesting to see how they go with the 4K release and how much work they'll put into bringing it out to that format. So once we know more details, we'll certainly be breaking them down in future episodes of Trial by Stone or with the Gathering songs. That's for certain, yeah. And I mean, and that's the thing. I mean, this year is the 35th anniversary of the Dark Crystal, and yeah, I mean, it's kind of amazing to to see that this film is still continues on to this day, which is quite amazing. I don't know. I just wanted to know, I know your thoughts on sort of the whole 35 years of Dark Crystal and sort of the year that it's been on Dark Crystal.
Yeah, I obviously, and I think you and I share a love for everything Jim Henson, not just Dark Crystal, even though Dark Crystal is kind of the top for us. But Jim Henson, unfortunately died way too young. But he died and he left a legacy of films that have touched the hearts of so many people and touched us touched our hearts in ways we can't understand, and we are beginning to understand, and we're processing. Jim Henson is the reason why you do your podcast. His vision. I mean, certainly he's collaborative. It's not just him. It was him and all of the amazing people like Mike Quinn, who's been in the Star Wars films, and Timothy Clark and Toby Philpott, and all of these people involved in the making of The Dark Crystal and other Muppet films. And so the 35 years since The Dark Crystal, I mean, he made this little film that didn't do very well, but it's passed the test of time. It's lasted. It's been his signature. It was he called it his masterpiece, and it's remained that. And it's ageless. It's you look at it now and nothing looks cheap. I mean, you can see some wires here or there if you try. But it stands the test of time. The effects are still mind-blowing. And I know we've said this before on the Dark Crystal Minute, which people will hear about or will hear us talking about later. But the film was ahead of its time, and it's still ahead of its time. And all practical, no people, all puppetry. I've been dying for a film that takes up that mantle. And I've seen bits and pieces like Being John Malkovich and other films here or there, or some amazing stop motion, but there's no film that even comes close to The Dark Crystal.
Yeah, I mean, it's like it has been like a fantastic year for Dark Crystal this year. Just so much has been coming out this year. With all these sort of things that we sort of broke down with the Power of the Dark Crystal, Age of Resistance. You got your Song of the Dark Crystal and the Ultimate Visual History. That I would say were sort of the very big sort of highlights for this year for the Dark Crystal. So it's been bigger than ever now. Probably bigger than what it was back when the film came out. Because I know when the film came out, there wasn't a lot of merchandise. There was a couple little things here and there, but awesome exhibitions and whatnot. But yeah, and it's just amazing, just how much that we're getting now with the Dark Crystal. Being that it was just based on a one film franchise, but it's sort of it has been expanding probably. I mean, ever since I think it was like 2012 when they did the prequel comic for the Dark Crystal Creation Myths, and I think that's sort of what I think kick-started the franchise in a big way. And it's still like one of my favorite films. I just love the world. I love the creatures and the characters. I mean it's just a whole world that you can sort of lose your suspension of disbelief. And I think it's due to the fact that there is no humans in the film. It's all just puppets, and it's all but all these puppets seem there's a lifelike essence to them in that way. Just incredible at the time in that period of time of filmmaking at that time, especially 1982, where so many great films came out that year, not only with The Dark Crystal, but also with films like Blade Runner and Star Trek 2 and so many more. I'm just sort of forgetting on top of my head some of the other releases from that year. E.T., the extraterrestrial, which I think I vaguely remember that the Dark Crystal the trailer would get screened with E.T., so it was sort of the most widely watched. Probably the trailer that got watched the most was the Dark Crystal. So it's just such an amazing time for the franchise and for the podcast, and it's just sort of lost for words in a weird way.
Yeah. Well, and the legacy of the Dark Crystal has done, I think, what it's needed to. Jim Henson made this little film, like I said, that didn't do very well, but it spawned a legion of fans that are hardcore, that are in love with it, and a whole new world of comic books and figures and just so much. And then a burgeoning community and a film festival and a creature contest and so many different things. Um, Jim Henson was really, from what I know of him, from what we know of him, we don't really know him in person, but he was such a kind-hearted, gentle man, and I feel like that legacy the legacy he's left is that same legacy, um, of just these really wonderful, gentle, yet creative works of art that have never been matched before.
No. No, and still, I mean, it still hasn't in a way to this day. It's still a film that sort of stands on its own, and I think that's the thing, with Age of Resistance. Just, I mean, because it has been 35 years since the film, and it's going to be very interesting to see what Age of Resistance will bring to the table, and I mean, in a way, like what new technologies they're able to bring for the new show, for things that they were able to improve on that they sort of struggled with, possibly all those years ago. Yeah, so it's just a fantastic time to be a fan of the Dark Crystal, and yeah, and for myself, like I'm certainly gonna keep going with this whole podcast and producing all these shows, and yeah, it's gonna be a great time.
It will be, and really, I think we are in a wonderful time in kind of film history, and not just media. Like the amount of really really great shows that are coming out, and films too for sure. But we're getting really rich, character driven, well produced shows, whether it's been on Netflix or Showtime or Hulu or Amazon, and it's just pouring out, or AMC, and this is kind of a rehash of the 80s in some ways. Just the amount of really well made, well thought out films or shows and films, where we kind of had a real dead space for a long time. I mean, there's still some great stuff coming out, but the amount of good stuff coming out, and then of course Age of Resistance coming out, and it's unprecedented the amount of money that Netflix is going to spend. And really, this is kind of Henson's first big deal since the death of Jim. So
Yeah,
it should be, it's a great time to be alive,
it
and
is.
I can't wait for the future.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, there's just a lot that's just been happening. I mean, not only with the Dark Crystal, but also just with all our sort of favorite franchises. With Blade Runner and Star Wars, and things just keep happening every day. I mean, even recently with the Lord of the Rings, with Amazon, getting the rights to do a TV series. Which is really crazy. So yeah, there's so much to look forward to with Dark Crystal and fandom, with all these with the film and TVs and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, so I think we'll wrap up for this episode of Trial by Stone. So Jamie, I just want to say from a brother to another mother, thank you so much for being on this month's show, and yeah, certainly hope to have you back, another time, for sure, as to chat more Age of Resistance and other Dark Crystal things that sort of come our way.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for having me on. Philip, what you're doing with this podcast is amazing. You are one of the better friends that I've made in a long, long time, and to share something like this, everything is best shared with people that you know and you love. And when you share a love for the Dark Crystal and other things with people who, I mean, you and I are separated by a generation, but we still both have those same memories. So it's been an honor. It's been a pleasure. It's a pleasure to be your friend.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Yeah, it's yeah, I mean, I just can't believe just all those years ago that when I started the podcast, and then you messaged me like, hey, we'll chat over Skype, and chat for a while, and yeah, just really connected. And even more so when we met up for the first time at Star Wars Celebration back in Anaheim.
Yeah.
That was sort of a big highlight for us. Meeting each other as fans for the first time, and just just the great times that we always have chatting together, whether it's in person or just online through Facebook. So
Good Mexican food too when you were here.
Yeah, that was the best. I think I'm pretty certain we went to that restaurant basically every day.
Did you really? That's funny.
Yeah, because it was like the only really good restaurant, and I mean Shannon and I we both love Mexican food, so
me too. And it was cheap too.
It
not very
was.
expensive.
It was. Oh, yeah. So if I come back to Anaheim, I'll definitely be having a lot more of that Mexican there.
I expect you for celebration for the episode 9 or whatever.
Yeah.
So I expect to see you here.
Yeah. I hope so. Yeah. All right, cool. Thank you so much. Yeah.
You're welcome.
You've already taken too long, Gelfling. Hurry!
At last, the crystal calls. It is time. Time to return to the castle.
The crystal calls! To the crystal chamber!
And that's all the time I have for this month's Trial by Stone. If you'd like to contact the show, you can do so at darkcrystalpodcast@gmail.com. To find us on Facebook, you can do so at facebook.com/darkcrystalpodcast. We're also on Instagram at instagram.com/darkcrystalpodcast. You can tweet at us at darkcrystalpod. The podcast is now on Patreon, so if you go to patreon.com/darkcrystalpodcast, you can check out some of the rewards that we'll have on offer for anyone that can pledge to the podcast. It'll be greatly appreciated. Also, if you get a chance to review the show, whether on iTunes or Facebook, that'd be fantastic as well, as that'll boost the rankings. Thank you all so much, and come back next month for more Trial by Stone.